You're driving east on Interstate 15, somewhere between Los Angeles and Las Vegas, and you see it. 3 casinos rising out of absolutely nothing. No city, no suburb, no reason. Just desert, a state line, and a cluster of buildings that look like Vegas had a fever dream and dropped a few properties in the middle of the Mojave. Except the lights aren't on, the parking lots are empty, and if you slow down long enough to really look, something feels deeply, unmistakably wrong. This isn't a town that's sleeping. This is a town that died with its boots on. Hi, my name is Michael, and this is Old Vegas Legends, the dream that built Primm. Let's go back to the real beginning, not the sanitized version, the actual one. The year is 1954. There is nothing at the California-Nevada border on Interstate 15, and I mean nothing. Joshua trees, heat shimmer, maybe a roadrunner if you're having a good day. What there is, however, is one very specific legal reality. The moment you cross from California into Nevada, gambling becomes legal. That invisible line in the sand is worth a fortune to whoever figures out how to monetize it first. Enter Ernest J. Primm, a man who looked at the most inhospitable stretch of the Mojave Desert and saw not a wasteland, but an opportunity. He opened a small gas station and casino right on the border. Nothing fancy, nothing that would make anyone in Las Vegas nervous. Just a place to stop, stretch your legs, and maybe pull a lever before the long drive ahead. Here's what nobody gives Ernest enough credit for. He wasn't competing with Las Vegas. He was competing with 2.5 hours of dead air between Los Angeles and Las Vegas, and he was winning. Every car on that interstate was a potential customer. They all had to pass through. He just had to give them a reason to stop, and stop they did. By the 1980s, 3 full casino properties clustered at the state line. Whiskey Pete's, Primm Valley Resort, Prima Donna, one family, 0 competition for miles in any direction. His son Gary took it further. A roller coaster, a monorail, an outlet mall, a recreation of Bonnie and Clyde's bullet-riddled death car, which is either fascinating or deeply macabre depending on your disposition. I find it fascinating. My wife finds it unsettling. We've agreed to disagree. At peak, Primm drew 5 million visitors a year, 5 million people, to the middle of nowhere. Gary Primm didn't build casinos. He built a phenomenon. The glory days nobody talks about. I want to take a moment here and actually describe what Primm was like at its peak, because most of what gets written about this place focuses on the decline, and that's a shame, because the glory days of Primm were genuinely something. Picture a Friday afternoon in, let's say, 1995. The interstate is packed with California plates, families, couples, bachelor parties, retirees in RVs the size of small apartments. The Primm Valley Resort is buzzing, not Vegas buzzing, where everything is chrome and attitude and someone is always trying to sell you a nightclub package. Primm buzzing, which has a completely different energy. It's looser, friendlier. The stakes are lower, literally and figuratively. The slot machines were actually paying out at rates that would make a modern strip operator physically ill. Quarter slots, dollar slots. Machines that were loose enough to keep you playing for hours on a modest budget. The blackjack tables had minimums that a working person could actually afford. You could sit down with $100 and reasonably expect to still be there 2 hours later, which is the whole point, isn't it? Nobody wants to lose their entire bankroll in 45 minutes and spend the rest of the trip watching their friends gamble. The buffet at Primm Valley was, and I say this with complete seriousness, genuinely good. Not Vegas good where you're paying $40 for the privilege of standing in line for mediocre prime rib. Primm good, which meant generous portions, fair prices, and the distinct feeling that the people running this place actually wanted you to come back. Because they did. Their entire business model depended on repeat customers making the drive from Southern California, the Desperado roller coaster at Buffalo Bills. And yes, that's what they eventually renamed Prima Donna, was legitimately one of the tallest and fastest coasters in the world when it opened in 1994. People were driving to Primm specifically for that roller coaster, not to gamble. To ride a roller coaster in the middle of the desert at a casino. Tell me that isn't the most wonderfully American thing you've ever heard. And the weddings. Oh, the weddings. Primm did a brisk business in quickie Nevada weddings for Californians who didn't want to drive all the way to Las Vegas. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, you could get married in Primm by an officiant who had probably already performed 6 ceremonies that day and was impressively enthusiastic about it given the circumstances. I'm not saying these were the most romantic weddings in history. I'm saying they were exactly what the people having them wanted, and there's something genuinely lovely about that. This was the compact Primm made with its customers. You drive out here to the middle of nowhere. We'll make it worth your while. We'll give you a coaster, a buffet, a fair shot at the slots, a cheap room, and an experience that feels like a miniature Vegas without the attitude or the price tag. And for about 20 years, that compact held. Former regular visitors to Primm describe it the way people talk about a favorite neighborhood restaurant that got turned into a chain. You knew it wasn't the fanciest place in town. You knew the tablecloths weren't linen, but it was yours, and it was real, and it treated you right. That's what Primm was. And then, slowly at first, and then all at once, it wasn't anymore. The first cracks. Here's what killed Primm, and I want you to really understand this because it's important. Primm was not killed by mismanagement, although mismanagement certainly helped finish the job. Primm was not killed by changing tastes, although changing tastes made things worse. Primm was killed by a law, specifically the Indian Gaming Regulatory Act of 1988. Now, the full effects of that law took about a decade to really materialize in California. But by the late 1990s, and especially through the 2000s, tribal casinos were opening across Southern California at a pace that should have had every executive in Primm lying awake at 3 in the morning, staring at the ceiling. Think about what Primm's entire value proposition was built on. Californians can't gamble at home. The nearest legal casino is across the Nevada state line. So if you want to gamble, you make the drive. Primm is right there at the border. You stop, you gamble, you feel like you got your Vegas fix without committing to the full trip. Now, remove the foundational assumption. Californians can gamble at home, or close to home. The Morongo Casino is in Cabazon, barely 90 minutes from Los Angeles. Pechanga is in Temecula, an hour from San Diego. Agua Caliente is in Palm Springs. Soboba is in San Jacinto. These aren't shabby operations tucked into strip malls. These are full-scale resort casinos with hotels, restaurants, entertainment venues, and slot machines that are, frankly, as good or better than anything Primm was offering. The math here is brutally simple. Why drive 4 hours round trip to Primm when you can drive 90 minutes round trip to a tribal casino that has everything Primm has and more? The answer, for millions of Californians, was that there was no good reason, and so they stopped coming. Industry analysts who were paying attention could see the numbers shifting as early as 2002, 2003. Traffic through Primm was still significant, but the composition was changing. Fewer pure gambling trips. More people just stopping for gas and food on the way to Las Vegas proper. The customers who had historically been Primm's core audience, the Southern California day tripper who had no interest in making the full Vegas run, were vanishing. And here's the cruel irony that nobody in Primm's ownership structure seemed willing to confront. The tribal casino boom didn't just take Primm's customers. It made the drive to Las Vegas easier to justify. If you're already willing to drive 90 minutes for gambling, you might as well drive another 90 and go to the actual strip. Primm was caught in the middle of the market it had invented, and it was being squeezed from both ends simultaneously. The roller coaster, the outlet mall, the novelty attractions, these things could slow the bleeding, but they couldn't stop it. Because once the fundamental reason people stopped in Primm became irrelevant, no amount of gimmicks could rebuild the customer base. You can't theme park your way out of a geographic and legal disadvantage. Primm tried. To their credit, they tried hard, but the cracks were already spreading through the foundation. The corporate takeover that killed the soul. In 1999, Gary Primm sold his properties to MGM Grand for approximately $240 million. And this, I would argue, is the moment Primm's fate was sealed. Not immediately, not obviously, but irreversibly. I understand why he sold. The tribal casino threat was real, and he could see it coming. $240 million is a life-changing number. And MGM was one of the most powerful gaming companies on earth. If anyone could keep Primm viable, it was them. In theory, in practice, what happened is exactly what always happens when a corporation built around massive urban properties acquires a quirky, personality-driven border operation that runs on local knowledge and community relationships. The suits arrived, and the soul left. MGM didn't understand Primm because Primm wasn't in their language. MGM spoke high rollers, convention business, celebrity residencies, EBITDA margins. Primm spoke Southern California families on a budget, slot players who knew which machines were loosest on which days, wedding parties looking for something between Vegas fancy and courthouse boring. These are not the same language. They're not even related languages. The corporate standardization was immediate. Slot percentages tightened, buffet prices went up, while quality went sideways. Comps that used to flow freely because smart management understood a free meal today buys 5 return visits, dried up because some analyst in Las Vegas looked at a spreadsheet and saw a reducible line item. MGM sold to Station Casinos in 2010 for $400 million, more than they paid. after a decade of decline, which tells you everything about the gap between paper value and reality. Station casinos knew locals markets. But Primm was never a locals market. There were barely any locals. You can change the buffet menu. You cannot change the fact that millions of Californians can now gamble 20 minutes from home. What COVID did to an already dying town. Let me be honest with you for a second. By February 2020, Primm was not thriving. The casinos were operating, the lights were on, some of the slots were running, and if you stopped in on a weekend, you might still find a reasonable crowd. But the trajectory was unmistakable. Visitation was down, revenue was down. The roller coaster at Buffalo Bills had stopped operating. The monorail connecting the properties had gone quiet. The outlet mall was struggling with vacancies. Primm in early 2020 was a patient in a hospital bed who was stable but not improving. The doctors knew the prognosis wasn't good. The family had accepted that this wasn't going to end the way they hoped. But there was still a heartbeat. Then COVID hit. Nevada Governor Steve Sisolak ordered all casinos in the state closed on March 17, 2020. The date every Nevada gaming worker remembers the way people remember where they were during historic events. In Las Vegas, the closure was devastating but survivable. These were properties with hundreds of millions in cash reserves, Wall Street backing, and the economic might to weather a sustained shutdown. In Primm, the closure was something else. Primm's casinos were already operating on thin margins. Their customer base had been eroding for years. They didn't have the financial cushion that MGM or Caesars had. When the revenue stopped, it stopped completely, because Primm is not a place where you live and walk to the casino. It's a place you drive to specifically to use the casino. There is no alternative revenue source. There is no hotel loyalty program keeping people booking rooms for business travel. When the casino closes in Primm, Primm closes. Nevada casinos were allowed to reopen in early June 2020 with capacity restrictions, and most Las Vegas properties did reopen, albeit at reduced capacity. Primm was a different story. The question of whether to reopen properties that were already financially stressed, in a location that was already losing customers, under conditions that made the gambling experience less appealing, was a question that the ownership at the time apparently decided to answer in a particular way. They didn't reopen. Not right away. Not for a long time. And in the economics of marginal businesses, a long shutdown isn't a pause. It's an ending. Workers found other jobs. The institutional knowledge of the staff dispersed. The regular customers who might have returned found other habits during the closure. The delicate ecosystem of a barely viable hospitality operation collapsed. By the time there was any serious discussion of reopening, the conversation had shifted from when to whether. And the answer to whether, at least for significant portions of the Primm operation, turned out to be no. Inside the abandoned casinos, right now, this is the part of the story that haunts people. And honestly, I get it. There's something uniquely unsettling about a building designed for noise and crowds just sitting there in silence. Whiskey Pete's hits the hardest. The exterior is still there. The sign is still there. That giant cartoon cowboy still smiles at the interstate, which is somehow the most melancholy detail in this whole story. A cartoon cowboy advertising a party that ended years ago. Inside, the casino floor has been stripped bare, slot machines gone, felt pulled from the tables, the infrastructure of gambling removed as efficiently as organs from a donor. What's left is just bones, carpet, lighting fixtures, the architectural ghost of a place that used to pulse. Primm Valley Resort has seen limited activity in patches, basic hotel services here and there, but the casino floor has been largely dark. And if you've ever been in a casino during a power outage, you know exactly the quality of silence I'm describing. The absence of the sound is almost louder than the sound itself. Buffalo Bills sits with the Desperado coaster still visible from the interstate, still standing, still not running. That coaster was, in the mid-1990s, one of the fastest rides in America. People drove hours specifically for it. Now it sits in the desert like a rusted monument to a road trip era we're never getting back. Urban explorers describe what they find inside these properties the same way every time. Chairs stacked on tables, menus still in their holders, motivational posters still on break room walls, clocks stopped at whatever time the batteries died. One former dealer who worked Primm Valley for 11 years said walking past it felt like running into someone you used to love who doesn't recognize you anymore. That's the whole story, right there. The people left behind. Here's the part of the Primm story that doesn't get enough attention: the workers. Primm was, in the most literal sense of the phrase, a company town. The casino properties were the economic engine, the employer, and in many cases the housing provider for the people who worked there. The Primm properties maintained employee housing because there was simply nowhere else to live within a reasonable commute. You couldn't drive from Henderson or Pahrump every day. The distances don't work. So if you worked at Primm, Primm was your town. At peak employment, the Primm properties collectively employed somewhere in the neighborhood of 2,000 people. Dealers, housekeepers, food service workers, maintenance staff, security, hotel desk clerks, entertainers. Real jobs with real wages that supported real families. These weren't abstract economic statistics. These were people who had built their lives around the particular reality of working in the hospitality industry in the middle of the Nevada desert. When the layoffs came, and they came in waves over the years leading up to and through the COVID closure, these workers faced a situation that their counterparts in Las Vegas did not. A Las Vegas casino worker who gets laid off has options. The Strip has dozens of major properties. Downtown has more. There are tribal casinos within commuting distance. The gaming labor market in Las Vegas is extensive enough that a skilled dealer or experienced housekeeper can find work. A Primm worker who gets laid off has the Mojave Desert. The nearest significant employment center is Las Vegas, which is about 45 minutes away under normal conditions, closer to an hour or more in traffic. That's manageable if you have a car and a place to live in Las Vegas. But remember, many Primm workers were living in company-provided housing in Primm itself. Lose the job, lose the housing. Lose the housing, lose the proximity to the one other potential employer within reach. It's a trap with no good exits. Former Primm employees have described the closure experience in terms that are stark and specific. 2 weeks severance, sometimes less. A phone call or a letter. No clear timeline for reopening. No commitment to rehire, no real acknowledgement of the fact that these workers had, in many cases, given a decade or more of their working lives to these properties. One former housekeeper who worked at the Primm Valley Resort for 14 years described the end this way. She said she found out through a text message. A text message. After 14 years, I don't have anything to add to that. Who actually owns these properties now? Here's where things get genuinely complicated, and I want to take a moment to lay this out clearly. Because the ownership situation at Primm is, to put it charitably, a lot. The properties have passed through enough corporate hands at this point that tracking the current ownership requires the kind of research that makes you understand why people go to law school. After station casinos, after various management agreements, after COVID, the Primm properties ended up under the control of entities connected to a company called Affinity Gaming for a period, and then the situation got murkier still. As of the most recent information available, the properties are connected to ownership groups that have expressed interest in redevelopment but have not moved forward with any concrete, publicly announced plan. And this is a pattern in abandoned casino real estate that you see over and over again. The properties are too expensive to demolish, too complicated to redevelop, and not profitable enough to reopen in their current form. So they sit. They deteriorate slowly, the carrying costs accumulate, and the ownership structure gets restructured periodically in ways that suggest someone, somewhere, is still trying to figure out what to do with them. What we do know is that the land itself has value. 45 acres at a major interstate interchange on one of the busiest corridors in America, between two of the largest metropolitan areas in the country, that's not worthless real estate. That's potentially very valuable real estate if someone can figure out the right use for it in the current market. The problem is that the right use is not obvious. Casino gaming, as we've established, faces fundamental headwinds in this location. A truck stop or travel center doesn't need 45 acres and multiple high-rise towers. A warehouse or logistics facility makes no economic sense here. Whatever comes next for Primm has to be something that hasn't quite been invented yet, or at least hasn't been successfully applied to this specific geography. And until someone figures that out, the blue glass of Primm Valley Resort keeps catching the desert light, and the cartoon cowboy keeps smiling at the empty interstate, and the roller coaster keeps rusting quietly in the Mojave sun. Could Primm come back? I get asked this question a lot, and I want to give you an honest answer instead of a hopeful one, because I think you deserve the honest answer. Could Primm come back? Technically, yes. Practically, it's extraordinarily difficult, and here's why. The proposals that have floated around over the years generally fall into a few categories. First, there's the electric vehicle charging hub concept. Interstate 15, between Los Angeles and Las Vegas, is going to see a dramatic increase in electric vehicle traffic over the next decade. Those vehicles need charging stops. Primm is perfectly positioned geographically to be one of the most significant charging hubs on the West Coast. A Tesla supercharger station, or a network of competing chargers, combined with food, retail, and maybe a scaled-down gaming operation, could theoretically generate enough traffic to support a revitalized Primm. This idea has been discussed. It has not been executed, and the gap between discussed and executed in real estate development is where dreams go to die. Second, there's the renewable energy angle. The Mojave Desert gets approximately 350 days of sunshine per year. Utility-scale solar development has been transforming the economics of desert real estate across the Southwest. There have been discussions about whether the Primm land could support solar development in ways that might provide revenue to whoever owns it, while a longer-term redevelopment plan gets figured out. Again, discussed, not executed. Third, and this is the one that gets the most attention from gaming industry observers, there's the question of whether a reimagined Primm could compete in the current market if it repositioned itself dramatically away from traditional casino gambling and toward entertainment and hospitality. Think less slot machines, more experiences, an amphitheater for concerts and events, an outdoor adventure hub leveraging the desert landscape, a destination that gives people a reason to stop and stay that isn't just gambling. The challenge with this vision is that it requires capital investment at a scale that is very difficult to justify, given the property's recent history. Investors are not lining up to pour hundreds of millions into a failed casino in the Mojave Desert based on a concept paper about experiential tourism. That conversation tends to end quickly. And there's one more thing I want to say about the comeback question, and this is the part that doesn't make it into most articles about Primm. The regulatory and licensing situation is complicated. Reactivating gaming licenses, bringing a shuttered property back into full operation, navigating the Nevada Gaming Control Board requirements for a property that has been dark for an extended period, none of this is simple or cheap. The administrative and legal costs of reopening can be significant even before you spend $1 on physical renovation. Miracles happen. Primm has survived things that should have killed it before. The Fontainebleau in Las Vegas, which we've covered on this channel, is a story about a property that spent 14 years as a ghost tower before finally opening. Sometimes the impossible takes a while, but it happens. I'm not willing to write Primm off completely, but I'm also not willing to tell you that a comeback is likely, because the honest evidence doesn't support that. What Primm tells us about Vegas itself. Here's the thing I really want you to take away from this story, because Primm isn't just a quirky footnote in Nevada gambling history. Primm is a warning that Las Vegas was given and chose not to hear. Everything that happened to Primm is happening to Las Vegas in slow motion. The customer base that built the industry being systematically priced out and replaced by a theoretical high roller market that doesn't have enough volume to sustain what's been built. The loss of the casual gambler, the working class visitor, the person who comes 4 times a year on a modest budget and keeps the lights on between the whale visits. The belief that if you make your property fancy enough, exclusive enough, expensive enough, the right customers will materialize and compensate for the loss of everyone else. Primm got there first. Primm lost its casual customer base to California tribal casinos and couldn't replace them with a high-end alternative because the high-end customer has no particular reason to stop in the middle of the Mojave Desert. Las Vegas is now losing its casual customer base to price fatigue and a dozen alternatives, and betting that the luxury tier can absorb the loss. The jury on that bet is still out, but Primm suggests the odds aren't great. Remember that Caesars Entertainment CEO who said on an analyst call in 2023 that they were deliberately eliminating the lowest end of their customer base? Remember when we talked about how visitors are spending 53% more per trip to Las Vegas than they were in 2019, but gambling less? Remember the 11.3% drop in visitation in June 2025 alone? Those aren't random data points. Those are the early stages of what Primm went through, playing out at a much larger scale. The buffet was the symbol in both stories. Primm had great buffets at great prices, and then the corporate owners decided the buffets weren't profitable enough and raised the prices and reduced the quality. And eventually the customers stopped coming, and eventually the buffets closed. Las Vegas has been doing the same thing. As of 2025, only 8 all-you-can-eat buffets remain on the Strip, down from dozens just years ago, and the ones that survive charge prices that would have seemed like a joke a decade ago. The buffet was never just about food. The buffet was the compact, the visible, tangible proof that the casino understood the deal it had made with its customers. You come here, you gamble, and we take care of you. We give you value. We make you feel like you got something back. When the buffet goes, it's not just a meal that disappears. It's the evidence that the compact still exists. Primm broke the compact with its customers, and the customers left. The question that Las Vegas needs to answer, and answer quickly, is whether it's going to learn from Primm or repeat it. I'll be honest with you. Standing in a parking lot in Primm, Nevada, looking at a casino that used to be full and now sits silent in the desert heat, you feel something that's hard to name exactly. It's not quite sadness, although there's sadness in it. It's not quite anger, although there's anger too. It's more like the feeling you get when you look at an old photograph of yourself and realize that the moment captured in that image is completely, permanently gone, and you didn't know while you were living it that it was something worth memorizing. That's what Primm is. A photograph of what happens when an industry forgets who it's for. That's the story of Primm, Nevada. And I'll be honest with you, this one hit a little different to research. There's something about a place that used to be full of people, and now isn't, that gets under your skin in a way that economic analysis alone doesn't capture. If you've been to Primm, if you stopped there on a drive to Las Vegas in the 90s or 2000s, if you rode the Desperado or ate at that buffet or, and I say this without judgment, got married there at 2 in the morning, I genuinely want to hear your story in the comments below. These memories matter. They're the human record of a place that the financial statements will never fully capture. And if this video made you think differently about what's happening to Nevada's gaming industry, if you see the connection between what happened in Primm and what's happening on the Strip right now, share it. Because the more people understand the pattern, the more pressure there is on the industry to remember what made it worth visiting in the first place. This is Old Vegas Legends. My name is Michael, and we're here to make sure these stories don't disappear the way the places they're about did. Subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.